Jacob, I don't think we need to do introductions. So much is happening right now, and thanks for coming back on here. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been a while. It's probably been about 6 months, maybe.
I think the last time we spoke was right after the assassination attempt.
Oh, so July? Okay.
Yeah,
Late July? Was that late?
yeah. So it's
Okay, yeah.
so, and how much has changed since then?
Well, it's been a busy year. Uh, wow, been a busy year. I think
Well,
2025 will be even busier.
and people, I just was doing a text message exchange, and somebody said, the next 40 days are going to be crazy, and my response is for that. Just even after the election, I never thought that this chaos is not going to stop. The carousel is only going to pick up speed. It is
Of
picking up
course, of
speed.
course. Yeah, all the rocks that were balanced precariously going to start falling. I mean, Syria was one, but it's been a busy year, man. I mean, we had the palace coup against Brandon, obvious palace coup against Brandon. He didn't want to step aside. And we had, Trump won the popular vote, as I predicted on my blog, and electoral landslide. You got Syria blew up now. And Syria is much bigger than just Syria because basically, the entire Iranian so-called axis of resistance to Israel has now collapsed. So Israel is like in the winner's seat. Nobody expected that to happen, or not so quickly anyway. So that's huge, man. Um, but there's a lot of other outcomes from Syria that we can talk about. I got to say, I really like your recent guest, Matt Bracken. It figures that he's a ex-military guy, like serious, like an ex-career Navy SEAL. I mean, I'm not, just assuming that's true. I'm not verifying it, but um, it just goes to show, the one of the definitely like one of the most serious bloggers out there, and certainly one of the guests that you have that I respect the most is a guy that was a career military guy. I mean, that just figures, then you got like we've talked about this. You got a lot of total bullshitters out there like Mercurius and people like that, and they obviously have no military experience at all. So it just goes to show the value of that. Um,
So let's kick off. I want to get into the Syria thing then. So
yeah,
talk to me. Let's start at the top with this, and then drill down to what the impact it's going to have, because it
sure.
seemed to collapse fast. So what
Yeah,
were your
yeah.
thoughts when you saw this starting?
Well, when I saw the starting, I said it's really end of late November. Late November, as I wrote on my paywalled blog. If you want the good stuff, you have to pay for it. As I wrote in late November, I said it's not looking good for the government. Some of these jihadi guys are advancing 30 kilometers a day by road into remote areas just on a few Toyotas, on a few pickups. And if there's no one to stop them, that doesn't look good for the government because it doesn't take a lot of effort to set up a little checkpoint or an ambush that you can turn around a few guys in Toyota pickup trucks, right? Uh, I mean, we're not even talking tanks or anything, right? So, if it was obvious that the jihadis in the north were sending out, these scout parties and seeing how far they could get on various roads in various directions, and no one was stopping them. And so it was obvious that the government was paralyzed and in serious, serious, serious trouble. And I also made the call at the end of November, the very beginning of December, that if the South starts exploding, specifically Dara province on the Jordanian border, the government's not going to be able to deal with both the North and the South. And then, it's in big, big, big trouble. It's not going to manage. It's not going to survive. And that's exactly what happened. That's exactly what happened. They ended up taking Damascus from the North and the South, and there was no hope. And what's interesting, of course, is, the usual knuckleheads. I call them the YouTube and Twitter bullshitters. People like Mercurius, people like Scott Ritter, Larry Johnson. They were, Mercurius, even on December 3rd, 4th, around there, he was telling I got it, I got it, I downloaded, I got it in writing, I got it on video. He was saying, it's contained. It appears to be contained. It's fine. Everything's fine. They're gonna turn it around. It's gonna be great. They're gonna push the jihadis back. It's stabilized. Situation is stabilized, and he's like the Baghdad Bob, or like the that meme of the cartoon dog, and he's in a burning room and he's on fire and he's like, I'm fine, everything's fine. It's like that, right? It's like, come on, guy, you really want to be Baghdad Bob, and then 4 days later you go down in flames. But see, that's the problem with these people is, it's an echo chamber. The fact is that the most of the alt media, the alt scene, the alt commentariat is an echo chamber, just like the mainstream media is an echo chamber. It's just a different echo chamber. It's like a mirror image, Okay, well, we're alt. We're alt, so we want to be anti-imperialist and anti-Israel, and then pro everyone who's against Israel, and pro everyone who's against America, and that type of thing. But you're not thinking at all. I mean, it's just total zombification. And what these guys are doing is they're just selling a certain attitude and certain emotions to people that are comfortable in an echo chamber. And my philosophy is, are you, and I'm actually talking to your viewership now. I think your viewership is quite a bit better than Mercurious's, but do you seek out information and views, but especially data and facts that you are not comfortable with, right? So like if you're cheering for Russia, do you seek out
I'm smirking with the Putin picture in the back there.
Yeah. If you're all cheering for Russia every day, right? Do you seek out information from the Ukrainian side, right? Or are you just stuck in like a Russia Today echo chamber where the Russians are killing 1,500 Ukrainians every day and the Ukrainians are collapsing every day, right? So, I mean, if you're listening to Larry Johnson and Douglas McGregor, I think by now, the Ukrainian army deaths would be like 2 million or something, because it's like 1,500 every single day. If you're listening to Larry Johnson or Douglas McGregor. I think this is why Douglas McGregor is no longer welcome on Tucker Carlson. You don't see him on Tucker Carlson anymore. Because, like, dude, you were saying a year and a half ago, mid-2023, that the Ukrainians had taken 500,000 dead. That's not even counting wounded. That's just dead. That was a year and into the war. A year and like 3-4 months into the war. Now it's been another year and a half. So are you saying it's another 500,000 or more? Are you saying there's 1 million dead? I mean, are you fucking serious? Like, so at some point you get caught in your own bullshit and you lose credibility, even among people that are at least somewhat receptive to bullshit. But then you got the blockheads, the hardcore, of the Mercurius followers and the Johnson followers and the Ritter followers. They don't care what the facts are. They want to be told that, Israel is collapsing, Ukraine is collapsing, Israel will be extinct, all this shit, because that's their emotions, and they want to be validated. They want to be validated. It's about selling a certain attitude and selling emotions. And they can be fucking dead wrong every day, and they are, and they will not lose their audience. They will not lose their audience because it's not about being right, and it's not about the facts, and it's not about having correct predictions that are useful and that are accurate. It's about feeding people's emotional needs, to hate Israel or to hate imperialism or whatever. Okay? That's all it is. That's all these people are selling. They're selling emotions, and, they're selling a deep, deep echo chamber. So again, are you challenging yourself with contrary information that you don't like, that makes you uncomfortable? I subscribe to Ukrainian channels where I'm watching Russians getting blown up. Right? Do I enjoy that? No. You see my picture, you see my portrait here, right? I don't enjoy that. I don't enjoy seeing Russians getting blown up, but at least I get a sense of what's going on. That's not the Larry Johnson, Douglas McGregor, while they're getting, the Ukrainians are collapsing every day for 3 years bullshit, So you got to challenge yourself, folks. And I'm literally speaking to everybody that's watching, and I'm sure some people are on my wavelength, but some people are not.
Well,
So
you bring. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you bring up a very good point, and I want to. Oh, go ahead. Finish your thought.
no, you.
So I want to get into one question that I have. How was Assad? Because they've been trying to take him down for however many years, right? Obama tried it. The guy's like a cat. I mean, I kept referencing like the guy's like got 9 lives and they can't get rid of him. What
Yeah,
changed that they could do it now?
great question. I'm gonna have to give you the history of the world. Is that okay?
Yeah, as long as you got the time, you know me.
Yeah, that's fine. About Assad, no one knows where he is now. Right? He disappeared like the Tsar of Russia. For 70 years, the party line in the USSR was the Tsar of Russia and his family disappeared. We don't know what happened to him. You know? And that's what gave birth to the whole Anastasia hoax and whatever else is that they never actually said what happened to the Tsar and his family. This is like Assad, man. I mean, I have no doubt. I have no doubt that he's dead. Now, where his family are, probably in the Dubai or Abu Dhabi, someplace like that. But who the fuck knows? They might have all died on an airplane or something, and you'll never hear about them again. I think it's very, 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 very unlikely that anyone other than Russia had anything to do with his disappearance. That's my subjective opinion. I think they just decided to tie the ends, and be done with it.
So you,
Okay,
wait, you think Russia? You think Russia disposed of him?
yeah. There's no evidence either way. Right? I'm sure something will come out in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, like a week from now or a month from now, and people who believe that stuff will, and some of it is true. I'm not saying it's 100% false, but we may have a better idea in a week or a month when the CIA starts leaking to the New York Times or whatever. But I mean, Russia. They took out Prigozhin after the coup. Granted, he became an enemy, made an enemy of himself. They could have let Assad live in Moscow or something, but maybe it's just too much of an embarrassment. I don't know. It's my subjective perception, right? Let's start with the very beginning. So, Syria is one of these states that did not really draw its own borders, right? They came out of World War II as a French protectorate or province, basically. They were under direct French rule. And, after World War II, France decided, there's some places we're going to hold on to that have a lot of economic value to us, and there's some places we're not going to hold on to, right? They made a fight. They fought for Algeria. They fought to keep Algeria. They fought to keep Vietnam, right? Everyone knows about Vietnam. For Syria and Lebanon, for whatever reason, right after World War II, they let them go. I think it just, wasn't economically valuable enough, right? There were no French colonists there. There were no resources. Vietnam, they were getting rubber, they were getting coal, whatever. I think in Syria and Lebanon, they were getting nothing. So they let Lebanon and Syria go. And from the early 1960s, I don't know the exact domestic politics, but Syria fell into the sway or fell into under the shadow of the USSR. They became a Soviet client state, right? In tandem with Egypt, right? And in fact, they actually, at one point, for sort of top level PR and UN representation purposes, they actually formed one country. Like for a year or two, maybe 3 years, Egypt and Syria were officially one country. I don't know how many people know this today. It was called the United Arab Republic, the UAR. And obviously they were governed separately. Everything was separate, but they had one seat at the United Nations. It was more for PR. It was kind of a pan-Arabist, Arab unity thing. They were trying to get everyone else on board. Anyway, didn't work out. But not in a particularly nasty way. It just kind of fell apart. But from the mid 1960s, shortly before the Six-Day War with Israel, Syria and Egypt were very, very strongly in the Soviet camp. They were Soviet client states. They were receiving a large amount of Soviet military assistance, and economic assistance began. That accelerated after the Six-Day War, and by the early 1970s, Israel and Russia were directly fighting each other in the skies over Egypt. I mean, there were dogfights between Russian pilots pretending to be Egyptians and the Israeli Air Force. I mean, is Russian Soviet ground crews were manning the air defense sites there, the missile launchers during the 1973 war against Israel. Anyway, after from the mid 1970s, and then especially in the late 1970s with the Egyptian peace with Israel, Egypt flipped to the American camp. They flipped to the American camp because I think Sadat, the president dictator of Egypt who inherited from Nasser, he decided that he was much more likely to get the Sinai Peninsula back from Israel if he went to the USA to try to broker it and to lubricate both sides, keep everyone happy with a lot of money. And that's when the huge, annual military aid to Israel and Egypt began, right from the USA. So Egypt flipped. Egypt flipped, and it was absolutely shameless. They waited until, Russia built the Aswan Dam, and they got all the benefit they could out of Russia, and then they flipped over to the American camp. Syria stayed in the Soviet camp. And then even after the Soviet collapse, they stayed in the Russian camp, and then with the resurgent Russia under Putin, that started paying off. The problem with the problem with Syria is they went so hard with being a Soviet client state, and they stayed a Soviet client state for so long that they became a totalitarian, basic, not just a dictatorship, but like a totalitarian family military monarchy. A totalitarian family military monarchy. In every village in Syria, you had some office that was like the Interior Ministry office that was keeping records on everybody. It had some guy would be writing dossiers and records on everybody. What did you say? What did you eat? I mean, whatever. It was like, the Stasi in East Germany, man. It was that bad. Maybe worse. And the thing is, they never went full communist, but it was, and they never really went full socialist either. What it was basically was the ruling family from around the time, maybe just before the Six-Day War. I'm sorry, after the Six-Day War. At some point, I think it was in 1971, this guy Assad, Hafiz Assad, he was some Air Force general. He seized power in a coup from the rest of the Ba'ath Party, which Ba'ath is the Arab Socialist Party. They were in Iraq also. It means renewal. And it was this hardcore socialist party. Anyway, he took this party and made it into like a monarchy with himself at the head, and then his son inherited the monarchy. It was supposed to be one son, but I think he died in a car crash, and then it was the other son, Bashar. So he inherited in 2000, and so it's kind of like North Korea. It's this military dictatorship, but it's like this family monarchy. But they were never that communist. What it was people in the Assad family, the brother-in-law, all the in-laws, cousins, nephews, they basically ran the economy. right? Like, for example, Assad's probably still legally owns it, even if he left the country. Assad's brother-in-law owns Syriatel, which is the cell phone monopolist. They have all the cell towers and all this. The cellular service monopolist in Syria, Syriatel, is owned by one of the biggest companies nationally. It's owned by Assad's brother-in-law, and the whole economy is like this. The whole economy is like this. So if you're not in with the ruling family, or nowadays the Iranians that were there, I mean, you're getting nowhere, right? It's a very closed system. So if you don't have, connections with, I mean, forget it. Like you're going nowhere. It's not like people who live in the USA, UK, whatever. Those are, we're becoming a third world country. We're just like a third world country because they're going after Trump or something. No, you fucking idiots. We're nothing like a third world country. You don't even know what it's like to live in one of these countries. Okay, and another problem was that they had rapid population growth, and they weren't creating enough jobs for these people, right? Now we're starting to see some of this in the USA, where we have kind of the end of the growth of living standards in the USA, but in a lot of other countries, they're in a lot more stress. Also, during the 2000s and the early 2010s, you had a very serious drought where a lot of smallholder farmers, tenant farmers, whatever, that they couldn't afford, they could not afford, irrigation. They could not afford the more expensive irrigation solutions, whatever. They couldn't stay in business. So they abandoned their villages, moved to the cities. Okay. On top of that, they had, a couple million Iraqi refugees that they took in during the 2000s also. So they had basically overcrowded cities with people that, in many cases were not gainfully employed, right? Maybe, you have a big family and one person in the family has a job and is supporting everybody else or something like that, right? Very common in these second and third world countries. In these countries, you have some, bullshit government jobs, but it's all farmed out based on how loyal you are, how close you are to the ruling family. Are you in the right sect? Are you an Alawite? Are you a Christian? The Sunnis got shafted. So it's very, very based on who you are, who you know. It's not like a competitive civil service like we have here in the USA, right? So they do have bullshit jobs, but it's very, very hard to get a bullshit job. And a lot of people were just barely surviving, and there were too many people relative to the water and the employment that was available, right? And the government was doing nothing about it, right? The government was like, okay, well, our family runs everything. Fuck you. You don't like it? Fuck you. We'll put you in jail. Maybe we'll disappear you in jail. And in 2011, it blew up. Oh, of course, it doesn't help that the ruling family was from the coastal Alawite sect, the Alawis, which is an offshoot of Shia Islam. I don't know anything about it. But by Sunnis, traditionally, they're not even considered to be Muslims. They consider themselves to be Muslims, but by the majority Sunnis, traditionally, historically, they were not even considered to be Muslims. And they're in charge. So the Alawis, which are like 10% of the national population, I think they were probably made into a military class or military caste by the French in the divide. There's the divide and conquer strategy, or just the same way that the British, they took the Sikhs in India and made them like this elite military class that would go and oppress other parts of India on behalf of Britain, shut down protests and all that. Well, my understanding that the Alawis did the same for the French under the colonial rule, and then they sort of inherited They inherited, the military afterwards. So naturally, if you go to a military dictatorship, the Alawites are going to be in charge. And the Alawites, being a minority sect that's historically under suspicion, not liked by the majority, what do? They prefer to share power, farm out the better jobs, and so forth. With who? With the majority? No, with their fellow minorities. The various Christian denominations, the Eastern Orthodox, the Aramean Christians, right? The Arab Christians, Eastern Orthodox, Arab Catholic, Armenian Christians from, that moved into Syria after the genocide in 1915. And so it's basically a minority regime that is holding together based on family loyalty and the kind of the fear of the Sunni majority. And then the Sunni majority rose up. In 2011, the Sunni majority rose up. And I know there's a lot of people who are full of hate and got their heads in their asses, and they say, well, if you're a rebel, you're a terrorist. Well, yeah, it's funny. They don't apply the same standard to the Palestinians. The Palestinians, if they're living under military occupation, they have a right to fight back and do whatever, massacre and whatever. And it's all good because, but if you're Syrian, if you're a Sunni living under Alawite military occupation, totalitarian dictatorship, and you rise up and you protest and start toppling statues, all of a sudden you're a terrorist, right? And, this just goes to show how, people, they find their own echo chambers. It's all about emotion. They want to pick sides. And as someone that's not from that part of the world and you're living in America, UK, Australia, Europe, why the fuck you got to say, well, we hate Israel, but we love the dictatorship of Syria? It's just, well, it's obvious because, you're going to support anyone who's against Israel, but they're fucking even worse. They're even worse. So, I mean, the amount of soup and fucking porridge and sawdust in people's heads about this shit is just amazing. Of course, with the rebellion in Syria, it was, the government did what they do, is they started putting it down very brutally. It was a bunch of protests.
You talk about the recent one or the one back during the Arab Spring? Okay.
2011, Arab Spring. Well, they, they even killed some kids, man. I mean, there was one kid who was famously, participated in a protest and was then taken from his home. His body was given back to the family like 3 weeks later. There was a famous video went around where the dad showed how the kid had been tortured. Supposedly the genitals were missing. I don't know. I haven't seen the video. I don't want to see the video. But that video made it all around Syria. And then the country exploded. The USA didn't help because the U.S. ambassador was driving around to these protest cities saying, keep protesting. Well, okay. So the USA encouraged it, of course. But there was objective reasons to why people, went out in the streets against that regime. So once enough protesters were killed, then you have the guns come out, and the army started defecting. Basically the Sunnis in the army started defecting. The Sunni officers started defecting, right? The conscripts are mostly Sunni to begin with, but the Alawite, the Christian, Armenian officers, they stayed loyal because they're under threat. They're a minority regime. But the Sunni officers, they defected and their men, and some of them held out locally. Some of them went to the north and were trained by the CIA or CIA contractors in Turkey and became the so-called Free Syrian Army, which was basically a CIA proxy group that was run out of Turkey. Later, the Turks kind of took them over when the CIA pulled out. That was much later. Also, there was the CIA was training them in Jordan also. Massive, massive billions of dollars spent on this, on weapons, paychecks, contractors. So the CIA was in Turkey and the CIA was in Jordan training these rebels. As long as you're secular, you could go cross the border and get CIA training. But then there were also the jihadis. Al-Qaeda came in. And various jihadi groups that some of them were Al-Qaeda offshoots. One of them eventually became ISIS. And then some of them were, more homegrown. But the Al-Qaeda people, the jihadi people, were funded by the Gulf monarchies, in particular Qatar. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, at least, spent on maybe not so much weapons. These guys were finding their own weapons, but paychecks. Qatar was the paymaster for these guys. Just like more recently, they were the paymaster for Hamas. They were keeping Hamas going. And so it got to the point where there were towns and villages in every province that were just Indian country, no-go zones for the army and the police. And then within each major city, Damascus, Homs, Hama, Aleppo, everything except the coast, there were neighborhoods and entire districts that were also under the control of rebels. And in 2015, it almost came apart. The Iranians stepped in, but their help was not sufficient. So then the Russians had to help, and the Russians stepped in with big air power. They deployed about 50 combat aircraft to this coastal airbase, and they started bombing everyone into submission, and also sent in Wagner. Actually, Wagner had been there since about 2013, if not 2012, but it became open in 2015. And so between the Russian Air Force, Russian mercenaries, they started getting the situation under control, and the preferred strategy was, once you besiege this rebellious district suburb of Damascus, or this rebellious district of Homs City, or whatever, you besiege it with Russia's help, with air power, and then you give them a choice. Look, we can bus you out to Jordan, we can bus you out to Turkey, whatever, or to near the Turkish border, whatever. Just, we want to get you out. We'll do it peacefully. You can take your guns, just your guns, not your whatever else. You can take your wives, children, you can take your families, just go. We will put you on air-conditioned buses with little bathrooms in there. You can put your luggage underneath. And it was the famous green buses. So they charter bused thousands and thousands of these rebels out to Jordan, out to near the Turkish border. And it was a big success. And also, whoa, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. They also did a lot to train the Syrian army, and they fought ISIS. And Russia was fighting ISIS before the USA was fighting ISIS. Basically, they did a lot to clear ISIS out of eastern Syria, and then the USA, when Trump came along, they finished the job in Iraq. So, also, in some cases, they were able to get the rebels to, lay down their arms without evacuating, in particular in the south, in Daraa province, near the Jordanian border. They had a deal where, you can stay where you are, stay in your homes, just give up your weapons. So they went around, they did what they could to pacify the country without using unnecessary violence, without using the maximum degree of violence. They gave people a way out. It was very successful. But unfortunately, the Syrian government didn't change. What they did was, they dumped a couple of million refugees into Turkey, into Europe, so they were able to go a long way to solving their excess population problem by just dumping people, refugees in a Turkey and Europe, um, and also to slightly even the balance between the minority rulers and the majority Sunnis. So dumped a lot of Sunni Arabs outside the country, but it still wasn't enough to keep the place from potentially exploding. So unfortunately, the Syrian government didn't change. In fact, it got worse. Basically, what they had was uh, the minority rule continued, and it got even worse because then the Iranians are in there, and the Iranians want their peace. So the Iranians had various little feudal rackets in there, as basically like Aleppo. It had in the north, the first big city to fall in this recent offensive. Aleppo had a Syrian government, like the province had a Syrian governor, the city had a Syrian mayor, but the Iranians were kind of the shadow government, and they had a lot of economic concessions and so forth, right? So it was almost like, there's the mayor of New York, and then there's Don Corleone and the five families who are, really milking the place, and that's what the Iranians were doing. So in some ways, it was even actually worse than before the Civil War, because the amount of resources, the industry, the jobs, whatever, the natural resources has not grown. In fact, it shrunk because now the Kurds have the oil and the gas, and the government has to buy the oil and gas from the Kurds. And the Americans made sure to perpetuate that by protecting the Kurds. So the actual resource base shrunk, but at the same time, you got more hands in the pie with now that, you got the Syrian government, but the Iranians want a peace. The Russians are always trying to get their peace, whatever. And so the living standards did not grow. And basically at the same time, evidently, as we now know, Erdogan was in Turkey, was preparing his northern jihadis for an offensive, which ultimately the southern guys that laid down their arms in 2018 but never really laid down all their arms, they joined in, and it was all very organized, clearly all very organized. I don't know to what extent it was CIA or whatever, but the U.S. Air Force sure helped because they started bombing the Iranians that were trying to come in to help from the east, and the U.S. Air Force and a Kurdish offensive partially closed that avenue. So it was all, it was like really, it was the U.S. and Turkey. I don't know if they were coordinating, but they clearly had some plans. Against. It was all very opportunistic. What was the ultimate sort of trigger? The ultimate trigger was the most recent Israel Hezbollah war, because Hezbollah it still exists, but it got absolutely trashed. Absolutely trashed. Most of their command is dead. They're a shambles. They have to reorganize. And if anyone was right there, right next door, who could step in and maybe quickly save the Syrian government from collapse, it was Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is wrecked. They need time to rebuild. And so when did the northern jihadis under Turkish influence, when did they launch their offensive against the Assad government? The very day that the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire went into effect. The very day that the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire went into effect, the northern jihadis launched their offensive against the Assad government. Okay? Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. So now you have Hezbollah, which cannot survive without a land corridor to Iran, because the way it went, it was, the last 20 years since the American invasion of Iraq, basically there was a land corridor, Iran, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, where Iranians would send weapons, rockets, missiles, everything, even cash, to Hezbollah overland. Now that is closed, right? Because Syria is in Sunni hands now. They don't like Hezbollah. The fact is, Hezbollah is now isolated and in the dumps and on the way out. because they cannot survive without a land corridor to Iran. They are done. Hezbollah is done.
You think it's
Okay?
done? It's done.
It's done. It's not a player anymore. I mean, they will, how it looks exactly, how they will go away, I don't know. Ultimately, I think the Sunnis and the Christians in Lebanon are going to rise up and cut their fucking throats to one extent or another. Because the way the Hezbollah basically ran Lebanon. The way they did it was by assassinating anyone that didn't agree with them, including Prime Minister Rafik Hariri in 2005. Blew him up, and it blew up a bunch of other Sunnis that opposed them. And in fact, there was a Shiite female newscaster on Lebanese government TV. Well, maybe it was no, I'm sorry. It might have been the Hezbollah channel. Anyway, there was a Lebanese Shiite newscaster. This was circa like 2009, 2010 or so, who was famously on a hot mic, and this went around. This got around. She was on a hot mic saying, okay, who do we blow up next? Because she was supposed to be newscasting about some guy that got, another political assassination, and Hezbollah denies it. And she actually hot mic say, who do we blow up next? If you're in Lebanon, it's famous. But they basically killed everybody in Lebanon who was opposed to them, intimidated the rest, and people were just, terrified to stand against Hezbollah and say, we don't want to be just an Iranian outpost against Israel. We want to be our own country. It was not an option. You could not say that. You could not say that. And now I think, you're going to see payback time. Hezbollah is fucking gone. They are out, man. They're done. What happened this last week plus, 10 days, the biggest winner out of this, well, Turkey, obviously, they got their, they're pressuring the Kurds to get off the Turkish border now. The single biggest winner is Israel. The Iranian so-called axis of resistance to Israel has collapsed. Okay? Hamas is fucking trashed. Gaza is trashed. It will never be rebuilt. It is a fucking wreck. It will never be rebuilt. There's not enough money that anyone's going to donate to rebuild Gaza. Number two, Hezbollah took a big beating and is not in a position to fight Israel again right now. And number three, Syria, the absolute linchpin of Iranian dominance in the Near East. And the link between, the ground link, right, between the Shiites in Iran and Iraq and the Shiites in Lebanon is now Sunni. It is hostile to Hezbollah. Okay? Hezbollah is done. Hamas is fucking done. How exactly these groups go extinct, I don't know, but they're all done. The Syria as a base for anti-Israel operations and smuggling to Hezbollah is done. Basically, like today, it's like Israel almost has no enemies on their border anymore. It's like all of a sudden they fucking woke up and they're like, all our enemies, I mean, they might still be there, but like they're done. They're fucking, they've been destroyed. They've been destroyed.
So let me ask you a question. So Syria. So what happens in Syria today? Will there be fighting within factions of trying to gain control? And then after you answer that, I want to shift over. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it depends if Turkey keeps paying the paychecks of these jihadi guys. The group is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. HTS. In English, they're known by their initials HTS because no one can fucking say the name, right? It's not simple like Al-Qaeda.
Which let me ask you something, because isn't the leader of HTS, doesn't he have a $10 million bounty on his head by the United States government?
So we have our Turkey ally, we have our NATO ally, Turkey, that is literally either directly paying the paychecks or they are, giving it as a lump sum, but it's Turkish money. They are paying these HDS guys, a number of whom are on the U.S. watch list, death list, whatever, including this leader, the HTS leader, who has a $10 million bounty on his head. Prior to these last 10 days, every few months or maybe every month or so, the USA was actually doing targeted drone assassinations on these guys. Some were successful, some not. I think they actually tried to kill the leader of HTS several times. Okay, so this is like a fucking soup, man. This is a soup. Like the best bet is not to even to be involved. Is not even to be involved. You know, I mean, Trump has the right instincts. Unfortunately, unless Trump just pulls the plug on the entire American Empire project, there's no way. Like you can't say, well, we're not going to be involved in Syria. Of course, you're going to be involved. You're there. You got military bases in Syria. Is he going to pull them out? He's not saying that. He's not. You notice Trump's not saying anything. He's not saying, I will stop funding the Ukraine. I will pull U.S. military bases out of Syria. He's not saying that. He's just saying, well, don't get involved. You got to wrap it up, whatever. He's not giving any specific promises. So most likely he's just going to get rolled and keep all the rackets going because we're not seeing anything concrete from him right now, right? So most likely the U.S. is going to stay in Syria, and it's going to be droning these guys that are under Turkish support. It's crazy. But for as long as Turkey is paying these jihadis, keeping them afloat financially, and paying also the Free Syrian Army guys, which are now the Turkish proxies but not jihadis, to fight the Kurds, as long as Turkey keeps paying all these guys, Turkey's going to be in charge, and Turkey's going to get what it wants, right? Like, so Turkey's going to run Syria. So there's not going to be any really big factional fighting because, Turkey doesn't want it, right? The question is, if Turkey becomes weak, or they have big economic problems, man. You look at the USD TRY exchange rate, their currency's in the gutter. They got inflation. Erdogan barely won re-election last year. I mean, or was it earlier this year? I mean, Turkey's got big economic problems. How long are they going to be able to keep this game going, this imperial game? I don't know. If it falls apart and Turkey has to step back, all bets are off. It's going to be like Afghanistan in the 90s. I mean, that's, but basically what we just saw is the collapse of the last Soviet-inspired, Soviet-client state in Southwest Asia, right? I mean, previously you had the communists in Yemen back in the day. You had the Democratic People's Republic of Afghanistan. You had, you had the socialist Ba'ath regime that was then taken over by Saddam Hussein in Iraq, that was allied with Russia, also allied with the USA in the 80s. Crazy. All of these regimes have collapsed. Now, the last one is Syria. So what you're seeing is the region is returning to its trend line, right? The region has returned to its trend line. There's no more Russia. That's it. No more Russia.
So Syria, as of today, it could remain in control of it could remain in control of Turkey as long as they keep paying the bills, basically, and funding all this. But you don't know. We don't know if that's going to continue or not, based on their own economic challenges right now.
Exactly.
So how does Russia play a part in this with their military bases or ports that they have? Well, how will that factor into this?
The latest news is they have to pull out. I mean, there's already. Basically, the Russian thinking was, well, it looks like Syria is going to collapse, but we still have the coast where that's the Alawites and the Christians on the majority, and we can probably hold out on the coast. Well, what's happened now, as of this morning, people in the coastal region, even literally right next to the Russian bases and the Russian port, are toppling statues of the Assads. They are protesting. They are walking around with guns saying we're rebels. There was apparently a convoy of jihadi rebels that actually made it into Tartus, Syria, and a larger one that made it into Latakia. So the jihadis have now shown their presence in these areas unopposed, and in fact, they're being greeted in a friendly manner. Now, we don't know how the majority of the locals feel, because it could be that these are like Sunni refugees or Sunni minority that's living in this coastal area where there's an Alawite and a Christian majority, and that the local Sunnis are now flexing their muscles. I don't know. But it's obvious from this past overnight, Saturday to Sunday and Sunday morning, December 7th, 8th, that it's too crazy. Russia has no open support on the coast right now. This regime was so fucking toxic, and now they're so fucking disappeared. Nobody wants to step forward and say, we want to be with Russia now. That is obvious from the videos that we're seeing. We don't know if Gallup took an opinion poll, how people would feel. We don't know. But right now, the muscle is with forces that are against Russia. So the Russians are leaving. They've already, basically, unofficially, they're leaving.
They're abandoning their stuff. Will they pack up their shit kind of thing? Or will they?
It seems that they're being given some time by Erdogan to pack up and leave in a normal fashion. It's not going to be like Saigon, 1975 or whatever. Right? So it seems like he's letting them save some face. Otherwise, they'll say, oh, we can't import your tomatoes into Russia because they got some bacteria, or, we can't have Russian companies selling tour packages to the Turkish coast anymore. There's economic leverage that Russia had. There's no reason, if Russia's leaving, there's no reason to make it like a big embarrassment. Just let them leave. Let them leave peacefully. And it appears that that's what's happening. The problem for Russia is that the airbase on the coast, Khmeimim, and the Russian port concession in Tartus was Russia's window to Africa and to the Suez Canal. All right, because if you look on a map, Russian shipping from Novorossiysk on the Black Sea or from the Crimea, it has to go through the straits between Turkey, and legally they have a right to do that as long as they're not at war with Turkey, but it's sketchy. It's always under question, right? And for example, in 2015, when Russia first got involved in Syria, it was a big question as to whether the Turks are going to let them keep coming through the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. What's very convenient for Russia is if they want to fly some guys or some sensitive materials, whatever, supplies or something, they can fly them from southern Russia over the Caspian Sea, over Iran, over Iraq, over Syria, land in Syria, and from there they can either fly into Libya or whatever else, somewhere in Africa, or they can, link up with maybe some military exports or whatever and proceed further into some of these war zones, such as Libya or deeper into Africa that, the Russians have been involved with to try to push out the French or whatever. So it's given the Russians a lot of flexibility to be able to have this port and an airbase in Syria where, we can refuel our ships, whether it's military shipments, military exports, whatever. This is a place we can refuel, reprovision, fix our ships to include cargo ships, and so we're not just reliant on the Russian mainland, and it's something closer to these areas that we're involved in, such as Libya, such as Central Africa, etc. Also, if you're flying, Russian mercenaries out to Central African Republic, for example, let's say, or Chad or Niger, how are they going to fly? Well, basically fly them over Iran into Syria, and then from there you can refuel, wait a day, whatever, then fly them out to Africa, and nobody in Egypt is going to be concerned that you're overflying their airspace. Nobody's going to give you a problem. You're going to have permission. Now, it's all dependent on Turkey, man. For overflights, I mean, if you want to fly over now Syria or Turkey, I mean, to get from southern Russia into Africa, it's like you're at the mercy of Erdogan. And keep in mind, Russia and Turkey are supporting different factions in Libya and are arming different factions in Libya and making big money off of it. And there's Russian advisors that are there or were there until at least recently teaching the Libyans how to use this stuff, including advanced air defense hardware. So, do you think Erdogan is going to allow Russia to easily transit through Libya, through Turkey to get to Libya when he's competing with Russia and Libya? How do you think that's going to work out? So this is I don't even know how the Russian project in Africa is going to go, man. Whether it's Libya or whether it's Central Africa, they're in trouble, man. They're in trouble. I don't even. It's bad. I mean, it's really bad, really bad.
So that was my next question. How is Putin going to respond to this?
Well, he's not.
Just take it as a loss?
Yeah, that's it. It's a complete humiliating catastrophe and embarrassment, and you might have to roll up the African operation. I don't know. We'll see. But he can't fight against it. It's done. It's over. Best he can hope for is to beat the Ukraine.
So now he has to basically regroup, potentially leave Africa, and just chalk up Syria as a loss.
Yeah.
Okay, so with Putin and Ukraine, now that I mean, this is a big blow to Russia, then, right? Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, it has absolutely no bearing on the Ukraine war at all, or at least no harm to Russia. This doesn't, as far as Russia's war effort with the Ukraine. If anything, it helps. First of all, Russia saves $1 billion a year that they were spending on maintaining the airbase and the port, right? $1 billion a year, and we're just over. And on top of that, they get to send their aircraft home and the technicians and the pilots, and they can now use them against Ukraine. Now, it's not a lot. It's a shadow of the deployment of 2015 and 2016. They do not have a lot of aircraft left in Syria. I mean, it's probably less than 10 that were functional at any given time, combat aircraft. Probably less than 10 combat aircraft, strike aircraft, that, not counting cargo planes, that were functional, that were available for use at the Khmeini air base in Syria. But, well, okay, there's still a lot of ground crews, technicians. All of that gets sent back to Russia now, and they can use it against the Ukraine. So, no, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt the Ukraine war effort at all. I mean, it only helps Russia. So
So, okay, so focusing on Russia Ukraine here for a minute. Now, where is that all sitting with Trump coming in? I mean, you kind of touched on it, saying things might not necessarily change when he takes office. But, recently with the Oreshnik hypersonic, what was your take when?
Well, that's not real hypersonic. True hypersonics are hypersonic cruise missiles that are in the lower layers of the atmosphere and they fall to the ground. I mean, what they're talking about is hypersonic reentry vehicles that are basically MIRVs. But MIRVs, even during the Cold War, multiple integrated reentry vehicles. But these are pieces of the warhead that then travel and hit different targets, right? They split up like maybe 10 or 20 kilometers up or something, or 30 kilometers. But the MIRVs, even during the Cold War, were hypersonic. I mean, they travel many times the speed of sound. So that's nothing new. I mean, I don't, this is not, when people think of hypersonic weapons, this is not one. It's a misuse of the term. I'm not sure what the capability of that Oreshnik is that is different than what existed before. I think probably it's probably a little more accurate so that you can use it with conventional explosives and still destroy something, whereas the older missiles, you had to have a nuclear payload. Otherwise, it wasn't like you were going to hit something precisely, right? So that's probably the benefit. I think the main thing about the Reshnik or other such missiles is that they're actually threatening to use them now against the Ukraine, which they didn't before. I think that's the big deal here. What's the question?
Just where that all sits now with Ukraine receiving or getting the green light to send over more ATACMS into Russia.
Well, that's the thing. The last like 8, 9 days, the ATACMS have stopped. The Storm Shadow scalps, the ATACMs into Russia they've stopped. They've stopped shooting the big accurate stuff into Russia. They're still sending, little explosive drones with 20, 30 kilograms of explosives, but the big stuff has stopped. I've written about this on my blog. And so obviously someone got the message that Russia is going to be using, giant intermediate range ballistic missiles to destroy Ukrainian power plants, dams, whatever, just completely destroy the Ukraine. If these cruise and ballistic missiles attacks into Russia don't stop. So they've stopped. They've stopped. Someone got the message. Someone on the American side got the message. I mean, obviously.
So
I think what's comfortable for Putin is just continue to win the war on the ground, and as long as they're not blowing up stuff inside Russia in a big way, we don't have to destroy the Ukraine. Like I think that's but I mean it will be destroyed eventually on the ground, but not something that has to be a big spectacular. We blew up some dam kind of attack, right? Go ahead.
no, I was going to ask you. Did you watch Tucker's interview with the Russian Prime Minister?
Oh, that was the Russian foreign minister.
Foreign Minister, excuse me.
Yeah, honestly, I don't have time for that stuff. It's like 2 hours long or something, and I just don't have time for that. This is why I don't watch podcasts and videocasts and all that. But I don't think that Lavrov said anything that original, but I think he said, yeah, they all want to negotiate with us now because they're losing, but why should we, right? He said something like that, right? I think, yeah, give Russia, if everyone acknowledges that Russia's winning and the Ukraine has to collapse, so the Ukraine is going to collapse, so the Ukraine has to negotiate, you better give something to Russia better than just, well, Ukraine won't join NATO until 2030, but they can maintain themselves in the American sphere of influence and maintain their armed forces. I mean, okay, let's say, so if you have an opponent, right, and the opponent's alternative to a negotiated settlement, if your opponent's alternative to a negotiated settlement is to just kick your ass because they will come out far ahead of where they would be if they agreed to a suboptimal settlement for themselves, what are they going to do? Are they going to agree to a suboptimal settlement for themselves, or are they going to just keep kicking your ass? What do you think, Mike?
I think they're just going to keep kicking your ass.
They're going to keep kicking your ass, right? And everyone acknowledges that now that you cannot stop Russia from continuing to kick ass. Well, why do you think they're going to take a shitty deal? I mean, they are fighting now to bring the Ukraine, demilitarize the Ukraine, and bring it out of the American sphere of influence so they don't have the same fucking problem in 5 or 10 years that they had in Syria, where they thought the conflict was frozen. Excuse me, I'm frothing in the mouth. They thought in Syria, this conflict is frozen, it's done, we got our attention elsewhere. And guess what happened? Got their asses handed to them. Don't you think if they hadn't already learned their lesson from the Minsk I and Minsk II Accords in 2014 and 2015, don't you think they have now learned it from Syria, where we need a fucking resolution? If we're kicking ass, we're going to keep kicking ass, and we're not going to take some shitty deal so we can stop kicking ass and have a shitty deal where 5 or 10 years later you can attack us again, or we're back to the same fucking problem, where the U.S. is building up this monster on Russia's border. Whether or not it's part of NATO, almost doesn't matter. So I think what's amazing about the U.S. political scene and even Trump is they don't get it. I mean, what's in it for Russia? You got to give them something. And you know what? I mean, this whole theoretical side of negotiation where, if your alternative to negotiated settlement is better than negotiated settlement, then you keep doing what you're doing. You don't take the shitty settlement. I actually learned that in college, in graduate school, in an international graduate master's in international relations program, right? But it's not even just international relations, man. I mean, you could apply it at the street level with the mafia or something. I mean, this is life, man. You could apply it at home with your wife, this is just common sense, right? Why would Russia take some shitty deal if they're kicking ass? Go ahead.
So that was going to be my next question. You good on time?
I got a few more minutes.
Right. So that's my next question. This whole notion of Trump coming in and he's going to make a deal. Remember how he was saying he was going to make a deal in 24 hours? What are your thoughts on that? I can't wait to hear your response. You need a second to formulate something? Because
I'm just, this is my response. You have my response.
Oh, well, for people that are listening, they can't see this. You're laughing.
Oh, wait, this is...
No, it's both, but I mean, but people that are listening on the audio, they could...
okay. For people that are only on the audio and they can't see my face, if you're in the car or something, sorry. This is why, as I said on my blog, and I wrote about this even several weeks ago, the war's not going to stop. If anything, Trump's going to be another Nixon, where he's going to feel the need to escalate it somehow, to bring the Russians to improve our negotiating position. It's not going to stop. The only way it stops is if Trump pulls the plug the way that the Bidenites did with Afghanistan. Just fucking leave. And if the locals want to hang on to the wings of your fucking airplanes, they can do that. That's the only way that this can end without the war going and going and going and going and every man in the Ukraine fucking dying. That's the only way. Okay? But the U.S. political scene isn't there yet. They're not there yet. They're like, well, Russia's winning. We can't do anything about it, but we can give them a shitty deal, and maybe Trump can sell them on the shitty deal.
Like we're buying a car. Like we're buying a car.
Yeah, like you're buying a car. Oh, sell them a shitty car. Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Jacob, reiterate. That's not how this works. You're not going to charm Putin into just accepting.
Let me ask you this: when Trump went to meet with, what's his name, Kim Jong-un, right?
Yeah, North Korea.
Yeah. And the goal was he was going to charm Kim Jong-un into giving up, all of Kim's nuclear missiles and nuclear warheads because Trump is such a charming guy. You can make a deal with Trump. You can trust Trump, right? How did that work out? Does North Korea still have nuclear weapons, and probably more than when Kim met with Trump? Yes, they do. The charm doesn't fucking work. Sorry, man. Trump's not a magic worker. You gotta fucking give people something. The only thing that they could have given Kim was a commitment, and I knew this at the time, and I knew that this was why it would fail. The only thing is if you give a commitment where step by step, as you are verifiably dismantling your nuclear warheads, whatever, taking them down to the raw materials and sending the plutonium somewhere, to some other country, As you are doing that, we are verifiably withdrawing from South Korea and perhaps even from Okinawa, Japan. He didn't offer them that. He offered them nothing. How is it that U.S. military personnel and 100 or 150 U.S. strike aircraft, U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy strike aircraft are still going to be based in Korea, more in Japan? They don't have to withdraw, but Kim's going to give up his nuclear warheads because Trump is so charming. Are you fucking kidding me? You got to give people something. You think you're going to give, well, okay, here's the deal for Russia. We're going to freeze the front line. We're going to accept that we're not going to recognize your sovereignty over Crimea, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, etc. We're going to freeze the front line. The Ukraine promises not to try to take back these areas through military means. And we promise the Ukraine won't join NATO until 2030 or whatever. The fuck is that? But we still get to arm the Ukrainian army. We still get to cement and complete the total Ukrainization of the Ukrainian population such that all of their children now grow up to hate Russia, right? And we're still in the, American sphere of orbit, and, we're going to just join NATO later. Like, Russia didn't fight for this. The fuck are you talking about? What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you fucking serious? This is, you know what? This is, I had back to my graduate school of international relations, I had a professor who once talked about that Yasser Arafat's people once put it out in the media that they were going to give Israel a great deal. This was sometime in the 80s. Maybe after they got bounced out of Lebanon, they were in Tunisia chilling out. They had nothing else to do. They were coming up with dumb ideas. So they came up with this idea, and they pitched it somewhere in the media that we're gonna give Israel a great deal. We're gonna say that any Jew, this is in the 1980s, any Jew that was living in Palestine, what is now Israel, as of Israeli independence in 1948, and their direct descendants, however you define that, can stay in Palestine when we take over and destroy Israel. So Israel surrenders, but the Jews that were there, 40 years ago, or their descendants, can stay, but all the recent immigrants have to leave. The 2 million or whatever at the time. And this was like, this is our great magnanimous deal. Like, we're offering this wonderful deal. And Israel was like, they didn't even respond. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is a joke. Like, but this is the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, let's offer Russia this great deal. It's not a deal. It's fucking, it's an invitation to have another war in 5 or 10 years that Russia's probably going to lose at that time. And no one fucking trusts you anyway.
Well,
so
what are your two more questions if you got time. What are your expectations as Trump's coming into office for the United States? We've talked about this, and we haven't talked since he won. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, first of all, I just want to toot my own horn. I was not going to get into the electoral college. It was too iffy. But on my blog, I predicted, this is all there, that Trump would win the popular vote, and he would win an outright majority of the popular vote. That is at least 50%. Right? And right now, the count is, if you go on Associated Press, you go on Wikipedia, he's at 50%. Kamala Harris is at 48.4. I said she would get no more than 48%. Trump would be 50 plus. She would be not more than 48. The final count is 50 against 48.4. All right, that's pretty fucking good for some no-name blogger. All right, this is what people pay $19.50 for access to my paywall. The good stuff you got to pay for. Now, of course, if you actually do the raw numbers without the rounding, If you run the numbers yourself, you'll find that Trump actually got 49.99 or something like that. Close enough to 50%. Anyway, um, what I'm seeing is that his peanut gallery and all of the peanut galleries that maybe were not originally with him, but then came over to him, like Ben Shapiro, I mean, all the former Never Trumpers who came over, they actually think that they have this massive mandate to clean out the federal government and they're going to reform everything, whatever. First of all, what the fuck you guys going to cut? Are you going to cut student loans? You're not going to cut shit, okay? You might get rid of NPR, PBS. You're not going to do shit because people want their cheese. And even your fucking stupid-ass voters want their welfare, you know? You think Republicans are not on welfare? I mean, all these fucking old people want their Medicare and everything. Come on. And their Social Security and their, veterans disability benefits and whatever else. And all these handouts to, Alabama and Mississippi and all these places that can't support themselves, but they vote red. You fucking think that they're going to cut any of that shit? What are you going to cut? You're going to cut nothing. But so anyway, they have this, the peanut gallery thinks that they have this mandate to reinvent government or some shit or whatever, and to go after everybody, and we're gonna go after Liz Cheney, and we're gonna go after, whoever else. We're gonna put people in jail. It's like, you guys have been listening to Steve Bannon for too fucking long. I mean, goddamn, like, you guys are.
What about Doge?
I mean,
what are your thoughts on Doge, Vivek and Elon's government?
Nobody voted for Musk. Nobody voted for this bullshit. They're treating, and he's going up on Capitol Hill and talking to senators about. I mean, they must be like embarrassed to be up there meeting this guy. I mean, nobody voted for Musk, folks. This is like Bill Clinton appointing his wife to be like in charge of healthcare back in 1993. Nobody voted for this shit. Nobody voted for Musk. This is a guy that made his fortune on fucking selling shitty electric cars, with subs tax credits that were enacted by Democrats, and now he wants contracts for his space launchers. So the Democrats don't like him because he's not unionized. So he went over to the Republicans. It's all fucking transparent. He wants his government contract, but now he's acting like, well, I'm going to cut government. No, you're not. You're fucking in it so you can keep your business empire going. You want the government contract. You're not going to cut anything. The fuck is that? So anyway, but they have this big plan that, well, seeing as we can't cut anything, we're going to cut federal employees. We're going to say you have to come back to the office. You're done with telework. So these people now are going to fire themselves. They're going to quit. They're going to retire so we can save a few $1 billion and say that we achieved something. Federal civilian payroll and benefits is 4.1% of the federal budget. Even if you cut it in half, it makes no fucking difference at all. I mean, it makes no difference. Like, it doesn't do anything for the deficit or the debt, nothing, right? So this is like, you got to wonder, I mean, the government is working fine, Mike. People are getting their welfare checks in the mail. Everything, it works like clockwork. It's like clockwork. I mean, it's great. It's better than Syria. It works way better than Syria. Everybody gets their fucking money. I mean, there's no problem. Okay? There's no problem. What is the problem? Like, nobody voted so you can start talking about cutting government or, I mean, it's just like, nobody voted for this. 2% of people, to the extent that they're still alive, 2% who used to vote, who voted for Brandon, let's go Brandon, 2% who voted for Brandon in 2020 came over to Trump. And so he got 49.99% of the vote. And now he has a fucking mandate to throw people in jail and deport 10 million. This shit's happening. None of this shit's going to happen. Okay? All right? He'll be lucky if he can get out of his bed and scratch his ass. And then how's he going to do in the midterms? All right? I mean, these people are like, God damn. I mean,
What
the
about
amount of
what
yeah.
about RFK, Jacob?
I actually, he's going to be watching this. I actually have a reader, great guy, family guy, wonderful person, paying me $19.50 a month for access to my paywall. He's trying to argue with me that when RFK takes over the Department of Health and Human Services, he is going to do away with fluoridated water. And he's going to do away with obesity because we're going to have healthier food. I hope everybody is watching this so they can see you laugh. I mean, why? You even have to cover your mouth. Holy shit.
Well, I don't want to be loud. I don't want to, I don't
We're
want to
not
take
gonna have
over.
so many potato chips because we're gonna have RFK. He's gonna have a crusade against people being fat. I mean, are you fucking kidding? First of all, the chances of this guy getting confirmed by the Senate are zero. Zero. So maybe it can be a recess appointment, but then you have to you have to do those over every 3 months or something. This guy is not gonna, even if he's there for a day, he's not gonna laugh. These people, this guy, RFK, is not interested in fucking being in charge of a government agency. He wants to get in, grab some ass, philander on his wife a little bit more, be there for 6 months so he can have just enough material to write his next book about how he tried to break the government but he couldn't. Get the fuck out, have his next New York Times bestseller that's ghostwritten by someone whose name we'll never know, and that's it. This guy's not going to be running a fucking government agency. Are you fucking kidding me?
And big pharma's
People.
and big pharma's not going away.
Big
It's safe to
pharma's
say.
not going away. Big pharma's not going away. I mean, see, this is the problem. People, they take what they would like to see, and they assume that it's real and it's really going to happen because they'd like to see it. It's the same with these, all these Israel haters and the Mercurists and the Mercuritards and the Pedo Ritter tards. I call him Pedo Ritter because he has some legal history there. Pedo Ritter tards, the Larry Johnson tards, all these, and all the Israel haters were like, oh great, there's a war in Gaza, there's a war with Lebanon, Israel's going away. Israel's going away. Israel just had its biggest victory of all time. They're fucking golden for 10 years now. They won't have any threats at all, unless they have a civil war or something because the Jews can't get along. I mean, you fucking kidding me? This is what happens. Folks, you got to take the emotion out of it. Whatever you want to see, because this is how you want the world to look like, that is your emotions. And it's not legitimate thinking. It's not objective thinking. You got to cast that out, compartmentalize it, and look at the cold facts and educate yourself as to the cold facts. Compartmentalize your emotions and what you want to see and get out of the fucking echo chambers. Okay? Because this guy, I mean, he's got an autistic kid. He hates the vaccines. So then from there, he got into the fluoride and the obesity and the genetic food and this and that. And I'm like, dude, this guy's in a fucking echo chamber. It's an echo chamber. It's this all health freak echo chamber. Am I saying potato chips are good? No. But you're not going to get people in the ghetto to stop eating their fucking pork rinds. I'm sorry. And they're going to still buy those with fucking food stamps. Okay? You're not gonna stop this. This is on a train that needs to reach its destination. You're not gonna, come on. I mean, fluoride is not a fucking argument now. I mean, this is like John Birch's shit from the 50s. Go ahead.
So two more things. One, well, let's finish up the Trump thing. Then I want to ask you one more thing about the Middle East. So your expectation over the next 4 years. Well, let me share with you what I think, and you tell me if you agree or disagree. Because one, I was wrong. I thought they would put Kamala in. I thought she would win the election. So obviously I was wrong.
Well, I thought Trump was a stretch, but when the facts change, I mean, I changed my estimates, and a few weeks out, it was pretty clear to me he was going to win the popular vote at least. And after that, I was thinking if they're going to try some, funny business in Arizona, Pennsylvania, whatever, it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and I did not want to predict, but I mean, it was not unreasonable to think that 2020 was going to happen again. It was not unreasonable.
Well, and now that he is becoming the president, or the inauguration's next month. Look at the economic problems that we're looking at, the challenges internationally. We've talked about the Middle East. We've talked about Russia, Ukraine. He cannot come in here and just move levers and just make all this go away.
Well, this is what happens to the peanut gallery with every election, especially on the Republican side, because the Republican peanut gallery is particularly dumb, conservatives. So every time that there's some Republican that wins, and it can be whether it's a Republican presidential candidate or they get a Republican Congress or whatever, my entire adult life, even from when I was 17 and, the Republicans won Congress in November 1994. And they were going to do away with the Department of Education. Department of Education is still here, and Newt Gingrich is retired and probably doesn't have very much longer to live. Okay? They always get their head in the fucking clouds, like my good reader, nice guy, family guy, but it just has some ridiculous views. The guy that thinks that, Kennedy's going to do away with potato chips.
And Big Pharma. Big Pharma's gone.
Yeah, Big Pharma's gone or whatever. People, and fluoride's gone. People have just the partisan people or people that have some agenda that they are emotional about. People who have an agenda that they are emotional about. Their guy comes in and they're looking for the moon. The moon is 300,000 kilometers from where I'm standing. What they're likely to get is maybe they can catch some mosquitoes that are flying, 18 inches or 2 feet up. And that's by the time that the midterms roll around, they'll be content. Oh, well, we didn't reach the moon. We caught a few mosquitoes. It's the same shit every fucking time. Every election, and it's even worse with the Republicans because they're so fucking retarded, and I don't have anything against people with Down syndrome, but it's an important word to use. These people get emotional and they get retarded, and the problem is worse on the Republican side. The Democrats are just cool to be in power. The Republicans always have some agenda, axe to grind. They want to fuck somebody over that didn't vote for them or whatever, and it never works. All they do is create new welfare programs, and a deficit gets bigger, and the government gets bigger, and people get more dependent on government. That's all that ever happens.
Do you think at some point, though, what's going to be the breaking point that this eventually crashes, or it's just going to continue?
My fans know I'm still waiting. I'm waiting for the second pandemic. This whole financial system with the funny money, it can keep on going forever, man. It can keep on going forever. You can go back to watching Peter Schiff from 2008, 2009, and he's saying, well, once we hit this threshold of money printing or debt deficit, then it's all going to crash. I'm like, well, we went through that threshold. We went through the next threshold. We went through the next fucking threshold after that. How many fucking thresholds do we need to cross, and how much fucking bullshit do I need to hear about $300 trillion ticking time bomb of derivatives before you realize that it's all fucking bullshit? They can keep this game going for a long time. What brings it down is going to be something from the outside, something that is exogenous, like another plague or something like that. Worse than 2020. It's not going to be just because of a bunch of funny money. It's not going to be.
Hyperinflation?
Yeah, but there would have to be some external cause. It'd have to be the Yellowstone volcano goes up and destroys half the country or something. Yeah, we're going to have hyperinflation then because there's going to be no goods and services available. That's what's going to cause hyperinflation, is when there's no goods and services available.
Peter Schiff is always like, it's going to make the problem that much worse. It's going to make it. He's been saying that for years.
This guy's a fucking one-trick pony, man.
He's been saying that since 2007.
Nobody listens to him anymore because it's like so lame. But then like people like Mercurius, like a year ago, I was like, I check in with Mercurius once a month for laughs and to see how I can make fun of him on my blog. And like a year ago, he had some guests and they were talking about the $300 trillion derivatives time bomb. I'm like, Peter Schiff was talking about this in 2008, 2009, 10 when it was a $200 trillion derivatives time bomb. Like, who the fuck cares? Folks, the way that they frame this is bullshit because derivatives, you got people on both ends of a bet. You can't have like both sides blowing up at the same time. Like there's a millions of bets out there, and on different commodities and stocks and bonds. They can't, both sides of every single bet can't all blow up at the same time. That's not how it works. I'm sorry. But this is what you get. You get bullshitters who don't understand what they're talking about. Whether it's they don't understand derivatives, they don't understand Syria, they don't do their homework. Do you think Larry Johnson or Mercurius would have given you the history of post-colonial Syria the way that I did? No. Because their people don't want it. It's just about emotion. It's just about, hey, give me a certain flavor, a certain attitude with your fucking English Oxford accent, that I can feel good about that I'm listening to this. And nah, folks, the alt media, again, alt media is a mirror image of the MSM. It's just as fake and it's even more retarded. Go ahead.
What's the future of Iran then after all this? Or
Well,
before you answer that, or go ahead.
The next revolution is in Iran.
Not Saudi Arabia, not Qatar, not.
Next revolution is in Iran. Is fucked. Iran is a shithole. They've been their government's main goal has been all these foreign projects. Iraq, Syria, Hezbollah, Yemen. They've massively underinvested in their own country. I mean, they got parts of Iran that are just becoming uninhabitable, running out of drinkable water, whatever. I mean, it's just total shithole. Outside of Iran, maybe outside of like the capital city and maybe like Isfahan or something. I mean, you look at their cities. I mean, it's just total shithole. It looks like Syria, just total shithole. And
does the revolution happen from within, or will Israel march across Lebanon?
No, it's not going to be Israel. Maybe Israel's going to do something to help trigger it if the Iranians do something really crazy, but it's probably going to be internal.
Like immediately, or is that down the line?
Oh yeah, when it happens, it'll be in a week or 10 days, man. But it's I don't know. Whether it's 2025 or another 5 years, I don't know.
But at this point, they just sit back because they've been, in your view, they've been so defeated and depleted.
They just got their nuts cut off and handed to them, man. Like, I mean, it's just, yeah. They're as humiliated as Russia right now. Yeah.
Does Russia and Iran keep their, quote, alliance? Does BRICS factor into any of this?
They have.
BRICS factor into any of this for you?
BRICS, I don't know. BRICS is just some club to talk about stuff. I mean, they're not going to have some alternate currency or something. See, this is what Trump does. He goes on Twitter and invents some, or his Truth Social, and he invents some imaginary caravan. There's this big caravan that's coming through Mexico. If the president of Mexico doesn't stop this big caravan, I'm going to shut the border. I'm going to put 6,000%, million% tariffs on all Mexican goods. And then like a day later, oh, she bent to my will. I solved it. She turned the caravan back, And it's like, was there ever a caravan? I don't think so. I mean, you're talking to Michael Yan. I haven't heard anything, I mean, I think the caravans are pretty much done with the election, man. I don't he just makes this shit up like one day, on his Truth Social, Twitter, whatever. The next day he solves it also over Twitter. And then it's like, it's an achievement for him. And then all of his peanut gallery are like, yeah, he solved this. He solved the caravan. He got the president of Mexico to turn the caravan around. Like,
well, you remind me.
There was no caravan.
You remind me.
So this is the same. This is the same thing. This is the same thing. He's like, oh, if he puts out on his Truth Social, if they don't stop with this alternate currency nonsense, you better believe I'm going to shut them down. Billion% tariffs, whatever. Quit fucking around. You're going to use the dollar until you die. Well, nobody was talking about any alternate currency. That was like bullshit bloggers and Russia Today and Pepe Escobar. I mean, there was no plan. There was nothing like, it was maybe like, okay, in 20 years it would be a nice to have, but there was no actual plan to have any alternate currency, right? But he puts it out there, And then he's gonna a week later, a month later, or a day later, he said, "Well, they backed down. It was all because of me. I threatened them with tariffs." It's like you create bullshit, and then you claim you resolve it. It's pure Trump, man. There's no this whole BRICS thing, alternate currency, all this bullshit about Silken Road, Iranian route, like trade route, Chinese trade route through Iran and Syria, and the complete pipelines from Qatar through Syria. All bullshit. It is complete. It exists on the blogosphere, on YouTube. This is not real, folks. It's all complete fucking nonsense. And now it's over because there's no route through Syria anyway. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, did you hear Sebastian Gorka? He's new advisor, and he was on an interview talking about, we're going to tell Russia, if you don't come to our terms, the support to Ukraine is peanuts in comparison to what we'll send. Did you see that?
Well, no, I didn't, but I'm not surprised. First of all, Gorka's a lightweight. I mean, the guy is. I think he was like a professor at the Naval University or something. I don't know. Like he's never, before Trump, he'd never held an actual government policy job, right? He's just some political science PhD, and he worked for the Naval Graduate School or something like that, right? That's number one. He got a job with Trump because he was loyal, and but didn't even do anything in the first Trump term, and then he left after a year or two and to do his radio show. Total fucking self-promoter. Achieved nothing, but you go and you start your own radio show based on your Trump experience. I mean, it's like, cashed out. Okay. But it's funny that he talks that way because, first off, I mean, the support to Ukraine is pretty much maxed out unless you want to intervene with the U.S. Army, right, or the U.S. Air Force. So saying that it's peanuts compared to what could be is ridiculous. But it just goes to show they don't have, I mean, I don't know if he's talking to Trump, probably not, probably talking out of his own ass. But it just goes to show that they are, when they don't get what they want from Russia because Russia doesn't buy their shitty used car of a deal, they're going to have a decision. They either need to take a huge face hit and a huge embarrassment and just pull the plug the way that the Brandonites did in Afghanistan, or they're going to need to escalate somehow. There's ways that they can escalate without a huge increase in material support, but there's things that they can do. They can send give Tomahawk missiles to the Ukraine, whatever. There's stuff that still can be done. All right? They're going to have to escalate or pull the plug. Those are the only two options. They will come to that realization soon enough. Right now, they're still head in their ass land. Go ahead.
Do you think, last question, I keep saying that, but Hegseth or do you think Hegseth gets confirmed? And then what are your thoughts on Kash Patel?
I have no idea if Hegseth gets confirmed or not. I like Hegseth. He is the smartest guy in the entire, out of anybody that, has been nominated or said to be nominated or planned to be nominated or whatever. He's the smartest guy. He's actually on record as saying that the Democrats, by fighting Ukraine, the Democrats were really fighting Trump because they were keeping the Russia hoax alive, basically, and the Russia hate. And then if Trump ever came back, they would pin him to the security state with the Ukraine and not let him pull out of it, right? He's the only guy that said that. I mean, that was amazing. I read that. I was like, wow, man, he gets it. He gets it. Whether he gets confirmed or not, I don't know. I don't think he might. If he does, he might sabotage the Ukraine a little bit, but he's not going to be able to stop the overall flow of it. Kash Patel that's a joke, man. I mean, this is a guy who's a young Turk. He's like 30-something, he's mid-30s. He's a young Turk. He was a legislative aide to Devin Nunes, made his name, digging into the whole, spying on Trump thing, found about it, a bunch of interesting stuff. But that was it. Like, he was not a supervisory person. And then I guess he got some kind of political appointment in the last year or so of the Trump administration. But, like, this guy, like, has never managed anybody. Maybe a few interns or something in Devin Nunes' congressional office. But you want to put him in charge, and he's known to be a hothead. He wants to tear everything up, whatever. You're going to put him in charge of a government organization with like 30,000 employees, which is a law enforcement and justice-oriented organization, where he has absolutely no experience in law enforcement, no interest in law enforcement, no experience in justice, no interest in justice. He just wants to tear the place up, specifically make it so toxic for the counterintelligence division that spied on Trump that they can no longer spy on Trump because they no longer exist. He wants to tear them up, force them out. It's like 3% of the agency. So he's going to be focused on tearing up or firing 3% of the agency. The other 97%, you got to manage it somehow. I mean, this is such a fucking big joke. But this is the thing with Trump. If you look who he's trying to appoint to key roles, key roles like regime security roles. We're not talking about Department of Energy or Department of Education. If you look at who he's trying to appoint to regime security roles, it's people who obviously have no power base in Washington, have no friends in Washington, are toxic in Washington, and would be wholly accountable and dependent on Trump only, as if he was Stalin or something, right? Kennedy, Gates, that went down in flames, but Gabbard, right? Hegseth, right? Patel. Probably can think of a couple others, right? Those are people that they have no friends, no power base, no support. They are Trump's people, and that's it, period. It's obvious what he's doing. And I'm not criticizing, because he had a really bad time the first time, but the fact is, he had 4 years to find some good people, that would be loyal and competent. What the fuck was he doing for 4 years? Just golfing? This guy's a fucking clown. He is actually dangerous. Like, he is dangerous in the sense that when the shit hits the fan, if we get another pandemic or something, or a war with China or something, these people won't be able to handle it, and it will come apart. That's why I'm saying he's dangerous. Not dangerous because he's like a dictator or something. He's dangerous because he's trying to appoint flunkies that won't be able to handle it when the shit comes apart. Thank you.
So you think these next 4 years are going to be rough?
We're going to get hit with something. We're going to get hit with something. It's going to be at least on the level of 2020 and probably a lot worse.
Where can people find you, Jacob?
Thank you. So, I'm at the Dreizin Report or the DreizinReport.com. Dreizin. If you could put a caption, you do audio-visual editing, right? Or no?
No,
Oh, okay. Well, don't worry about
but
it.
I'll put all the links on the publish. It'll be all on there. Oh, that's right.
You do put that. Yeah,
I got both. I got both of your URLs too. The War Porn Hub and the.
Oh, nice. Yeah. If you go to warpornhub.com, one word, it redirects to my blog.
I love that you bought that. I love that you got that one.
Yeah, thank you. I have a paywall. I'm $19.50 a month, but I do my homework. Obviously, as you can see, I give you a little bit more than just the blah blah that most people, most bloggers tend to do. So, without crapping on anybody, you got some good people on your show, but I think I'm worth $19.50, and I appreciate this opportunity to plug myself. Thank you.
Thanks for coming back on. Look forward to more conversations ahead. Have a great rest of your year, and we'll see where this all goes.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Jacob. Mic drop.